Have you ever wondered what it's like to live a life full of secrets, to hide behind a mask so carefully constructed that even those closest to you have no idea who you truly are? Meet Ava Blake, an unassuming bookseller in a small Florida town with a secret that could change everything. On the outside, Ava is just a humble bookstore employee, quietly offering book recommendations and organizing shelves. But what no one knows is that she's also the best-selling author of a hit novel, a story that's touched the hearts of thousands. So, what happens when the one thing she's kept hidden is exposed? In this story, Ava is faced with a life-altering decision: stay in the shadows or step into the light. But being in the spotlight comes with its own challenges. Will Ava finally reveal her true self, or will she retreat back into the quiet world she knows? You won't want to miss this journey of self-discovery, ambition, and the courage to embrace who you really are. If you're ready to dive into Ava's story and see what happens when she's forced to choose between her secret identity and her public persona, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Before we dive into this emotional and inspiring journey, let us know in the comments. What would you do if you had to live a double life? Would you reveal your secret or keep hiding? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now let's get started with the author behind the counter. The author behind the counter follows the journey of Ava Blake, a quiet bookseller in a small Florida town who secretly writes best-selling novels under a pen name. Despite her literary success, Ava hides her true identity, fearing that revealing herself as an author might disrupt the comfortable life she's built in her bookstore. But when a local customer unknowingly challenges her, telling her to learn from this author, while holding a copy of her own book, Ava is faced with a choice: continue to hide in the shadows or step into the spotlight. As she embarks on a whirlwind book tour, Ava must navigate the pressures of fame while remaining true to herself, ultimately discovering that true success isn't measured by recognition, but by the meaningful connections she builds and the courage to live authentically. This heartfelt tale explores identity, ambition, and the balance between personal fulfillment and public life. Will Ava finally embrace who she truly is, or will she return to the shadows? Tune in to find out. Disclaimer. Thank you for watching The Author Behind the Counter. Please note that this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental. The purpose of this video is to provide moral lessons, motivation, inspiration, and insights for personal growth. The characters, events, and situations are created to engage and encourage viewers to reflect on their own lives and aspirations. We hope you find value in the story and that it inspires you on your own journey. The morning sun had just begun to spread its warmth over the storefronts of Riverside, Jacksonville. The sidewalks gleamed with dew, and the hush of a waking city lingered in the air. Nestled between a vintage record shop and a Cuban cafe, the little bookstore known as Sunshine Reads opened its glass doors to the public. A bronze bell above the entrance gave a soft jingle as Ava Morrison turned the key, ushering in another ordinary day. Inside, the bookstore felt like stepping into another world. The faint scent of old paper and freshly brewed coffee mingled with the distant notes of jazz playing from a worn speaker in the corner. Shelves of books, both towering and intimate, framed the space like living walls. Their spines told stories even in silence, some crisp and new, others softened by time and touch. Ava moved through the aisles with ease, her worn denim apron tied neatly around her waist. She adjusted a few displays, carefully rotated the recommended reads table, and took her time wiping down the front counter. Her routine was precise, even graceful. After years of working here, she knew the rhythm of the store better than her own heartbeat. She had become part of the place, like a piece of well-loved furniture. Customers greeted her by name, often with familiarity, sometimes with indifference. She didn't mind. She had mastered the art of being present without being seen. At 37, Ava carried herself with quiet poise. Her natural curls were tucked beneath a dark head wrap, her almond eyes observing more than they let on. Most days she wore a plain cardigan and jeans, modest in style but clean and pressed. She was the kind of woman people passed in the street without a second glance, unless they needed help finding a book or directions to the restroom. But beneath that exterior, Ava held a secret so profound, it hummed inside her like a second heartbeat. Behind the gentle smile and folded hands was a woman who wrote into the night. A woman whose words had shaken hearts across the country. A woman whose name, though unknown to those around her, rested on the lips of thousands of readers. She was Ava Blake. A pen name born from her grandmother's first name and her mother's maiden name. A name that had topped bestseller lists for weeks. A name that had stirred book clubs, inspired think pieces, and provoked heated conversations in coffee shops and classrooms. The Fire Beneath Us, her debut novel, had exploded into the literary world like a match struck in darkness. It was a story of grief and courage, of Black womanhood and buried history. But no one in Sunshine Reads knew the author walked among them daily, ringing up paperbacks and recommending memoirs. Only 3 people in Ava's life knew the truth: her younger brother Miles, her best friend Camilla, and the editor who had signed her under a contract of total discretion. Her choice. She never wanted fame, only the freedom to write. And writing, she had always believed, required anonymity. So she kept her head low, even as copies of her book sat proudly near the checkout counter. That morning, Ava was restocking shelves near the front when the bell above the door jingled again. A stream of early browsers trickled in: students, retirees, a mother with a toddler in tow. She greeted them with practiced warmth, pointing out the local author section, highlighting new arrivals. Just before noon, she noticed a man enter the store, tall and sharply dressed. His movements were stiff, almost mechanical. His gaze passed over the stacks like he didn't quite trust the place. A Rolex peeked from under his blazer sleeve. He walked with the kind of presence that expected space to be made for him. He didn't acknowledge Ava at first. Instead, he strolled straight toward the bestsellers near the window, where a modest stack of The Fire Beneath Us sat in proud formation. The cover bore the silhouette of a woman standing in front of a burning field, her expression unreadable. The man picked up a copy, flipped it open with a flick of his fingers, and skimmed the first page. Ava remained quiet behind the counter, watching. He walked up to her a moment later, book in hand. "This one any good?" he asked, tapping the cover. She smiled politely. "It's been very well received." "Humph," he gave a dry chuckle. "Probably one of those stories trying too hard to be deep." Ava raised an eyebrow subtly but didn't respond. He glanced at her name tag, then back at the book. "You should give it a read sometime. You might learn something from the author." Ava didn't flinch. She simply met his gaze with steady calm and said, "Thank you. I'll be sure to do that." He paid in cash, not bothering to wait for a receipt. As he turned to leave, the bell above the door chimed again. Ava returned to her work without a word, her thoughts quiet but unshaken. The store continued as it always did, pages turning, voices murmuring, coffee machines hissing in the distance. But later that afternoon, in the break room above the store, Ava pulled out her phone and checked her email. There it was, a message from her editor confirming the evening's event. Tonight she would step out of the shadows. Not as Ava the clerk, but as Ava Blake, the author. And fate, it seemed, had one more page to turn. As the sun dipped behind the low skyline of Jacksonville, the storefronts along Riverside began to glow with the warm pulse of evening lights. The world outside the windows of Sunshine Reads shifted. Families on their evening walks, restaurant patios filling with chatter, and the distant hum of passing cars blending with the buzz of twilight. Upstairs, in the modest loft above the bookstore that doubled as a break room and storage space, Ava Morrison stood before a narrow mirror bolted to the wall. The mirror was old and slightly warped at the edges, but it showed her everything she needed to see. In it stood not the bookstore clerk known for her quiet nods and helpful smiles, but the woman the literary world knew only as Ava Blake. She had changed out of her cardigan and jeans, trading them for a long, flowing navy blue dress that swept past her ankles. Her hair, once tucked under a head wrap, now fell in loose, defined curls around her shoulders. A touch of gloss shimmered on her lips, and small gold earrings glinted beneath the soft lights. Her posture straightened not out of pride, but out of readiness. She wasn't nervous. She had done this before, twice in fact, though only in cities where no one would recognize her. Tonight was different. Tonight's event was being held in her own neighborhood, at a community arts center only 3 blocks from the bookstore. Tonight, there was a chance someone from her everyday world might attend. And yet, Ava felt nothing but calm. She took a moment to steady herself, then reached for her bag. Inside it was a single hardcover copy of The Fire Beneath Us, worn at the edges from her own reading, annotated in margins no one else had seen. She slid the book inside the crook of her arm, turned off the light, and descended the stairs. Before stepping out into the night, Ava paused at the counter and looked over the store one last time. It was quiet, dim, and perfectly still. She locked the door behind her and began walking. The evening breeze was cool against her skin, laced with the scent of jasmine and fried plantains from the nearby cafe. Her heels clicked lightly against the sidewalk. Streetlights flickered on overhead, casting warm pools of gold along her path. When she arrived at the community center, she was greeted by a familiar face, Leah, the event coordinator, who had no idea Ava worked just down the street at the bookstore. "Miss Blake," Leah beamed, reaching for a handshake. "We're honored to have you here tonight. Your novel has stirred so much conversation in our community. We had to move to the larger room because we're expecting a full house." Ava smiled gently. "Thank you for having me." Inside, the event room buzzed with anticipation. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, every one of them occupied. A table at the front displayed copies of her book beside a large poster of the cover art. To most of the people seated in that room, Ava's face was unfamiliar. Her pen name had always come with mystery. No social media presence, no author photos until the book became a phenomenon. Even then, only a single portrait had circulated, her expression calm and the background blurred. Now they would see her in person. As Leah introduced her, the crowd erupted into applause. Ava stepped forward, hands steady, gaze clear. She opened with a few words about her journey, careful not to reveal too much about her personal life. Then she read an excerpt from a pivotal chapter. The moment the main character, Lila, stands in the ruins of her family home, surrounded by memories and silence. The room grew quiet, entirely still as Ava read. She could see their faces as her words landed, some leaning forward, others blinking back tears. She had always believed stories had the power to carve open the soul. Tonight confirmed it again. After the reading, a Q&A began. A young woman in the front row asked how Ava had come up with such vivid imagery. A man in the back, older and soft-spoken, wanted to know if the story was based on true events. Ava answered each question with sincerity, weaving truth and craft together without revealing the roots she kept hidden. But it was during the book signing that she noticed him. The man from earlier. The one with the Rolex and the dismissive tone. He stood near the back of the line, a copy of her book tucked under his arm. At first, Ava thought he might leave. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot, glancing around as if trying to make sense of the moment. And then, slowly he stepped forward. When it was his turn, he placed the book on the table without a word. Ava met his eyes. Recognition flashed across his face, sharp and undeniable. The color drained from his cheeks as the memory connected. His arrogance cracked like glass under pressure. I saw you earlier today," he said quietly. Ava nodded, not with malice but with quiet grace. She uncapped her pen and signed the inside cover. "Read carefully," she said, handing it back. He took the book and stepped away, no longer the man who had looked through her hours before. The night wore on. Dozens more came and went, offering praise, thanks, stories of how the book had touched them. Ava received it all with open arms and steady presence. By the time the hall had emptied and the chairs had been stacked, she stood alone again near the exit, the city waiting quietly outside. She stepped into the Florida night, heels in one hand, signed books in the other, and walked home barefoot on the cooling pavement. Back to the bookstore. Back to the woman they still didn't know. The following morning, Sunshine Reads opened as it always did. At precisely 8:30, Ava unlocked the door, adjusted the display outside to catch the morning foot traffic, and stepped inside as though nothing had changed. The quiet murmur of the city waking up flowed into the store through the open door, and the scent of fresh pages filled the air. Everything was the same. The register hummed softly. The staff picks sat at their usual corner. The local author's shelf, still dominated by copies of The Fire Beneath Us, remained untouched since the day before. But something had changed, even if only within her. Ava moved through the store with a different sort of stillness, one rooted not in hiding but in owning. The event last night had not revealed her identity to the public, not in the way that made headlines or whispers behind her back. Yet it had confirmed something deeply personal: she could exist fully in both worlds. Ava the bookseller and Amara the author. The quiet woman behind the counter and the voice that reached across thousands of pages. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Camilla. Camilla worked part-time at the store, covering afternoon shifts and storytime sessions for kids. She had a free spirit and the kind of laughter that could dissolve any tension in a room. Today, she wore wide-legged pants and a white blouse with paint specks from her morning art class. Her curly hair was piled high, her earrings long and gold. She leaned against the counter, sipping iced coffee. "You were brilliant last night." Ava smiled. "You came." "Of course I came," Camilla said, flicking a crumb from the counter. "I stood in the back with sunglasses on like a secret agent. You really think I'd miss your first hometown appearance?" Ava chuckled, lowering her eyes. "I still don't know how I pulled it off." "Because you've always had this power," Camilla said. "You just never needed a spotlight to prove it." They fell into a comfortable silence, one only true friends could share. Did anyone from the store recognize you? Camilla asked. No, Ava said, voice soft. At least not yet. You know it's going to happen eventually. I know. Camilla leaned in. And when it does? Ava gave a small shrug. Then I'll keep doing what I've always done. Shelve books. Talk to people. Write when the world is quiet. Was a good answer. An honest one. Around mid-morning, a woman came into the store with her teenage daughter. Ava watched as the girl made a beeline for the fiction section, wide-eyed and eager. The mother drifted toward the bestsellers. Within minutes, the daughter held a copy of The Fire Beneath Us, clutched tightly in both hands. Mom, this is the one, she said. Miss Avery said it changed her life. The mother raised an eyebrow and turned the book over in her hand. You sure? Yes, the girl said, already halfway to the checkout counter. Ava greeted her with a smile. The girl set the book down reverently. I'm going to write like this one day, she said with youthful certainty. I already started my own story. That's wonderful, Ava said as she scanned the barcode. Keep writing. Every day if you can. The girl nodded. Do you write? Ava paused for a beat, then said, I do. Cool, the girl said. Maybe you'll be famous too someday. Ava smiled as she handed over the bag. Maybe. After they left, Ava stood still for a moment, her fingers resting lightly on the counter. That girl, bursting with hope and ambition, reminded her of who she had once been. Writing in secret. Filling spiral notebooks with stories too big to contain. Dreaming of being seen even if she didn't know how to be. In the early afternoon, Miles called. Her younger brother had always been her greatest supporter, though he lived across the state in Tallahassee now. She stepped outside to take the call under the awning. You really did it, he said, skipping a greeting. I watched the live stream this morning. They streamed it? She asked, surprised. Yeah, the center's page. It's already got a couple thousand views. Ava let out a quiet laugh. I didn't even notice any cameras. You looked amazing, Miles said. And that reading? Gave me chills. Mom would have been proud. Ava closed her eyes. The mention of their mother always hit a soft place in her chest. She imagined her now, sitting on the old porch swing with a tattered paperback in hand, nodding slowly at the words, feeling their truth. She used to say our voices matter, Ava said. Even when no one's listening. She was right. They spoke a little longer about nothing and everything, then said goodbye. Ava stood outside for a while after the call, watching the breeze play with the leaves of the sidewalk trees. Inside, the bookstore buzzed with quiet life. By evening, the day wound down and the traffic of customers slowed to a trickle. Ava rearranged the books near the counter, adjusting the display to face the door more directly. It was a small act but meaningful. Now, whenever someone walked in, they'd see The Fire Beneath Us before anything else. Whether they knew her name or not didn't matter. The story was there. It had always been there. And she, silent, steady, and unseen, stood right beside it. Saturday mornings at Sunshine Reads were always a mix of slow awakenings and sudden bursts of noise. Children's laughter echoed from the back room during story hour. The espresso machine hissed in the cafe corner. Old friends reunited by the biography shelf. Tourists wandered in with sunburned cheeks and the dazed look of too many museum stops. Ava preferred Saturdays. They reminded her of layered lives. Lives colliding, separating, then brushing past each other like pages turning in the same book. She was rearranging the new arrivals table when she noticed the man again. The one with the Rolex. He stood just inside the door, hesitating this time, eyes scanning the store until they landed on her. This time he didn't carry the arrogance from their first encounter. He approached the counter slowly, as if unsure of the ground he was walking on. Good morning, he said. Ava looked up and gave him a polite nod. He shifted the book in his hands. Her book. I owe you an apology, he said, voice lower than before. From the other day. I didn't realize. She raised a brow gently but said nothing. I read the whole thing in one night, he continued. Didn't even know I could feel that much from words on a page. There was a long pause. She let it stretch. Most people don't expect authors to also work behind the counter, she finally said, her tone measured. No, he admitted. They don't. He set the book on the counter. I bought another copy. To give to my daughter. She's 16. Thinks she wants to write. Ava reached for the register without a word, rang it up, and slid it back toward him. No charge, she said. Give it to her from a fellow dreamer. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. I'm sorry for underestimating you. Ava gave him the smallest smile. It happens. He left quietly, and Ava returned to the table of new arrivals, lifting one book after another, letting the spines speak to her fingers. Later that afternoon, while the store buzzed with the soft rhythm of background jazz and murmured conversation, a man in his 40s entered with a reporter's notebook tucked under his arm. His blazer was too warm for Florida spring, and his shoes had the kind of polish that said he rarely walked far in them. He approached Camilla first, asking for Ava Blake's latest novel. Ava heard it from across the room. Camilla looked over at Ava instinctively, then turned back to the man. "She's not here right now," she said smoothly. "Any chance I could leave a note for her?" he asked, flipping open his notebook. "I'm writing a piece for the Florida Literary Journal, local authors making national waves. I've tried emailing, but her publisher didn't respond." Ava moved closer, voice calm. "You can leave your card. If she's interested, she'll reach out." The man turned toward her. "Thanks. You know her?" Ava gave the same easy smile she'd perfected over the years. "We've met." He scribbled something on a business card and handed it over before heading for the nonfiction aisle. Camilla shot her a look. "He's persistent." "He won't find anything," Ava said. "I made sure of that years ago." But even as she said it, she felt the edges of that certainty beginning to blur. With the local event live-streamed, more people would start putting pieces together. Her privacy had protected her for so long, but it was beginning to unravel. Not through scandal, not through exposure, but through quiet recognition. That evening, she found herself upstairs again in the loft space, surrounded by boxes of backstock and the hum of the building settling. She opened her laptop and stared at the blinking cursor. There was a draft she had started months ago. The next novel. The one her agent had been asking about for weeks. But she hadn't touched it since her mother's birthday passed. Some silences were harder to write through. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to type, not about grief or fire or rising from ashes, but about a woman with a double life. A woman who poured coffee by day and wove lives into fiction by night. A woman who had hidden in plain sight because the world wasn't ready to believe she could be more than what they saw. The words came slowly at first, then faster. By the time the clock downstairs chimed 9, Ava had written 5 full pages. She closed her laptop, breathing evenly, and stood. The street outside had grown dark. The windows reflected her silhouette against the stacks of books. One woman, 2 names, and 1,000 untold stories waiting inside her. She descended the stairs with a kind of quiet strength. When she turned off the lights, the store disappeared into shadow, but Ava remained still and whole and known. It started with a flyer taped to the side of the register. Ava had seen it before, tucked on a community corkboard outside the local bakery, slipped into the windows of coffee shops and yoga studios. Bright red lettering across the top read Palm Grove Book Society, and below that, in hand-drawn cursive, monthly discussion. Always a surprise. The flyer was charmingly old school, with a list of past titles and a phone number written in fading ink. Camilla pointed at it as she rang up a customer's stack of romance novels. "They want to meet here this month." Ava glanced at the flyer. "Why here?" Camilla smirked. "Because they chose The Fire Beneath Us for April. They said it was time they honored a local author." Ava stilled. "You didn't tell them, did you?" she asked. "Of course not," Camilla replied. "They don't know. Just think it'll be cute to discuss the book in the store where it's sold." Ava walked away from the counter, pretending to fix a leaning stack of cookbooks, but her mind spun with images. Readers sitting around sipping iced tea and quoting passages from her own work, unaware that the author might be just a few feet away, rearranging shelves or wiping down the windows. The date was set for Thursday evening. Camilla printed off extra flyers. A display of the book went up near the front with a small chalkboard sign. "This month's discussion, The Fire Beneath Us." Camilla naturally couldn't resist adding a little sparkle to it. A ribbon of gold tulle wrapped the table legs and faux candles flickered beside the stack. Ava tried not to be anxious, but her stomach twisted every time someone picked up the flyer. She didn't want attention. She didn't want applause. But she also didn't want to hear her words reduced, misinterpreted, or worse, misunderstood, right in front of her. Thursday came. The book club filtered in just after 6. 12 women and 2 men, most in their 40s or 50s, carrying water bottles, tote bags, and the faint scent of sunscreen. They gathered near the cafe corner, dragging chairs into a circle beneath the skylight. Copies of her novel peeked out from purses and beneath elbows. Ava moved quietly behind the counter. She had no intention of joining them. She planned to clean the back office or stock the children's section, anything to stay out of earshot. But Camilla had other plans. "I told them you'd join the circle," she whispered, grabbing Ava's elbow. No. Yes. I'm not doing it. You'll regret it if you don't. Ava stared at her friend. The crowd was laughing about something. Someone held the book open in the air like a map, reading a passage aloud. There was warmth in the room and curiosity. No judgment. No spotlight. Just people who loved stories and wanted to talk about one. Still, Ava hesitated. But then a voice rang out from the group. It was an older woman with salt and pepper locks, her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. This line right here, she said, tapping the open page, made me put the book down and cry. Not because it was sad. Because it was true. Others murmured in agreement. Ava stepped forward. She didn't take a chair in the circle. She stood just behind them, hands resting on the back of an empty seat. She listened. They discussed themes she'd buried between the lines. Generational trauma, the quiet strength of women, the ache of choosing survival over love. They found things even she had forgotten she'd placed there. One woman shared how the book helped her reconnect with her estranged sister. A man spoke about reading it out loud to his teenage daughter during their road trip. Ava's throat tightened. Then near the end, the woman with the glasses turned to Ava. You've been quiet. What did you think of the book? There was silence. Camilla looked at Ava with an unreadable expression. A few club members turned their heads, eyes politely curious. Ava opened her mouth, closed it again, then said, I think the author wanted us to see something that we often miss. That healing isn't a straight line. That people carry wounds that don't always show. The group nodded. The woman smiled. Beautifully said. You must write yourself. Ava gave a small nod. Camilla folded her arms and said nothing. The discussion wound down. Copies were signed by each member for keepsake swaps. Bookmarks were exchanged. And then, just before the club disbanded, one of the younger women approached Ava at the counter. I recognized your voice, she said softly. Ava blinked. Excuse me? You read at the Civic Center last week. I was there. You wore a navy dress and read the part about the grandmother's letter. Ava said nothing. The woman smiled. Don't worry. I won't tell. But, thank you. Your words helped me find my way back to myself. Then she was gone. Ava stood behind the counter long after the last customer left. The store was dim except for the glow of the cafe sign and the last bit of light filtering through the windows. For years she'd lived with the fear of being exposed. But maybe it wasn't exposure. Maybe it was recognition. And it didn't feel so frightening anymore. The week after the book club meeting, Sunshine Reads hummed with a different kind of energy. The small town of Palm Grove, Florida, had always been a community where everyone knew each other's name, where the gossip was warm and comforting, yet sometimes sharp. But now, as the first whispers of Ava's double life began to spread, there was an undercurrent of curiosity, a ripple that couldn't be contained. Ava, however, chose to ignore it. She kept her days as simple as they had always been. She greeted customers with the same calm demeanor, helped mothers pick out books for their children, suggested the latest thrillers to avid readers, and restocked shelves when the late afternoon lull set in. Her life as a bookseller was still very much alive, still a part of her that she cherished. But the pull of her author self was undeniable. It had been weeks since she'd added to the draft of her next book, and now, every evening after closing the store, she found herself staring at the laptop, her fingers hovering above the keys, but never quite ready to commit to the next chapter. The quiet was no longer a sanctuary for her thoughts. It had become a place where the weight of her choices settled like dust. Then came the phone call. It was late afternoon, and Ava was in the back office, organizing inventory when the store's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and froze. It was her publisher. She hadn't heard from them in months. Hello, Ava? It's Liza from Morningstar Press. Her heart skipped. Hi Liza. How are you? I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Listen, I've got some exciting news. Your book, The Fire Beneath Us, it's been picked up for a national book tour. Ava felt her breath catch. A book tour? Yes. We've been in talks with the folks at HarperCollins and they're excited about promoting it. It's getting major traction. You've got a huge following now. We think you're ready to take that next step. Ava's mind raced. A book tour. That was the dream, wasn't it? Authors traveled from city to city, met their readers and signed books. There was media attention, interviews, and the kind of recognition that could change a career. But was she ready for that? Wait, she said, trying to find the right words. I'm not sure I can commit to that. I have a life here. I run a bookstore. I understand, Ava. But this could be a game changer for you. Think about it. This is the chance to really step into the spotlight. You can inspire so many more readers, expand your audience. We're talking big publishers, big names? Ava closed her eyes. It felt surreal, like something she could only dream about in moments of reckless imagination. But the weight of it, the publicity, the interviews, the travel, felt both exhilarating and suffocating. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, take all the time you need. But I'll tell you, this is a golden opportunity. Ava hung up, her hands trembling slightly. She sat down behind the counter, gazing at the shelves that had been her sanctuary for years. It was everything she had built. Her bookstore, Sunshine Reads, had always been her anchor. The thought of leaving it behind, even for a brief tour, felt like an impossible choice. That night, she sat at the counter long after the store had closed, watching the slow fade of the evening sky. She could feel the tension in the pit of her stomach, the pull of two worlds she wasn't sure could coexist. It wasn't just about the book tour. It was about what it would mean for her, the person who had spent so long hiding in plain sight, crafting worlds for others but never fully stepping into her own. The next day, as the store opened, she was greeted by a customer she recognized from the book club. The woman with the glasses, the one who had first asked Ava what she thought of the book, approached her with a warm smile. "You know," the woman said, "I'm still thinking about what you said during the meeting, about healing not being a straight line. It really stuck with me. I shared it with my daughter." Ava smiled back, feeling a quiet warmth in her chest. It was moments like this that made her love her job, love the small community that had embraced her, even without knowing the full story. As the day wore on, more customers came in, many of them mentioning the book club or sharing their thoughts on her novel. It was clear that the fire beneath us had become a part of their lives, woven into their own experiences and reflections. It was humbling but also overwhelming. That evening, as she locked up the store, Ava stood outside, looking up at the stars that stretched over the quiet streets of Palm Grove. She felt both grounded and lost, caught between the life she knew and the life she had only begun to step into. Could she truly leave Sunshine Reads behind, even temporarily? Could she embrace the author she had always been and let the world see her for who she was? The phone call had given her the opportunity to make a choice. The book tour was a promise of a new chapter, but what would that chapter look like? The idea of leaving the store, leaving her community, even for a few weeks, filled her with doubt. But the answer was clear. She had spent her whole life writing stories for others. It was time to live her own. Ava knew she couldn't put it off any longer. The phone call from her publisher had settled into her thoughts like an uninvited guest, and now it demanded her attention. She had spent the better part of the past week pretending she wasn't torn, working at the bookstore and deflecting every question from Camilla about the book tour. But the time had come for a decision. It was Sunday morning, and the store was quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of pages from a nearby customer browsing the classics. Ava found herself behind the counter, watching the clock tick towards noon. She had already cleaned the windows, restocked the shelves, and arranged the new releases in perfect order. But there was still an emptiness, like a page left unwritten. Camilla, who had always been perceptive, noticed the tension in her friend's posture. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" Ava turned to face her, unsure if she was ready to admit the truth. "Do what?" "Go on the book tour." Camilla's voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp. Ava hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think I have to. I can't keep hiding." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "But you've built your whole life here. This bookstore, the people?" "I know," Ava said quietly, her gaze drifting over the rows of books she had watched grow for years. "But the author I've been hiding behind the counter, it's not just a part of me. It's who I am. And if I'm ever going to move forward, I have to stop pretending it's not." There was a long silence as Camilla processed her words. Finally, she smiled, a quiet pride in her expression. "You've got to do this, Ava. You've earned it." Later that evening, after the store had closed, Ava sat in her office at the back of the shop. The space felt like it was holding its breath as she composed the email to her publisher. She typed slowly, making sure her words were measured yet resolute. "Dear Liza, after careful thought, I've decided to accept the offer for the book tour. I'm ready to step into the spotlight and see where this journey takes me. Please let me know the next steps and I'll prepare accordingly. Best, Ava Blake." She hit send, the weight of the decision finally lifting from her shoulders. It was done. There was no turning back now. The following week, as preparations for the tour began, Ava found herself juggling the demands of her bookstore with the mounting responsibilities of being a published author. The publisher had sent over the tour schedule, events in Miami, Orlando, and Jacksonville. Each city would have its own set of interviews, book signings, and media appearances, There was a press kit to prepare, a photographer to hire, and interviews to schedule. The thought of it all was both thrilling and terrifying. Ava also spent late nights drafting her speech for the first event, nervous about speaking in front of a crowd. The idea of being on stage in front of hundreds of strangers, all eager to see the face behind the words they had read, filled her with equal parts excitement and dread. But she couldn't allow fear to stop her. On the day of her first event in Miami, Ava stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, adjusting the collar of her jacket. The reflection staring back at her was different. Sharper, more polished, but still unmistakably Ava. She could almost hear the store's familiar hum in the back of her mind, the sound of footsteps on hardwood floors, the soft jingle of the doorbell as customers entered. She missed Sunshine Reads already. She picked up her phone, scrolling through a few texts from Camilla. "You're going to do great. Remember, you're not just an author. You're a storyteller." Ava smiled at the words. She hadn't realized until now how much she had come to rely on the comfort of her bookstore, the simple act of connecting with people in quiet ways. But this was different. This was a new chapter. When she walked into the event hall later that day, the reality of the tour hit her. Rows of chairs were set up in front of a podium, with a few rows reserved for press and VIP guests. The room was buzzing with the anticipation of her arrival. The sound of her heels clicking against the floor seemed to echo in the large space, and for a moment, Ava was overcome with the feeling that she was out of her depth. But as she stepped up to the podium and looked out at the sea of faces, something shifted. She was no longer the woman hiding behind a counter in a small bookstore. She was the author, the one who had written the words they had all read. She could see the eagerness in their eyes, the respect they had for her craft. And with that, she knew she belonged here. Ava cleared her throat and began her speech, her voice steady but soft at first. "Thank you all for being here today. I've always believed that stories have the power to change us, to connect us, to make us see the world differently. And that's what I hope my words do for you." As the evening went on, the crowd responded warmly, laughing at her anecdotes and asking insightful questions. The book signing that followed was long and filled with heartfelt exchanges, each person grateful for the chance to meet the author behind the book they had devoured. Ava had never felt more seen, more connected, or more alive. When the event finally ended, Liza from the publisher caught up with her backstage. "You did great," she said, her smile wide. "The turnout was fantastic. We're already getting requests for more events. You're a star." Ava felt a flush of warmth at the praise, but a part of her still ached for the quiet simplicity of Sunshine Reads. But the truth was, she was no longer hiding behind the counter. She had stepped into the light. The author and the bookseller. Both Ava Blake. And somehow, that was exactly where she was meant to be. The final event of the tour was in Jacksonville, where the bookstore was larger, the crowd was more impersonal, and the media attention was overwhelming. Ava had done interviews with local TV stations, signed hundreds of books, and posed for countless pictures. The exhilaration from her first few events had dulled into a steady fatigue. The hotel room was quiet now, with just the hum of the air conditioner breaking the silence. Ava sat at the desk, looking out at the city lights far below, feeling a mixture of accomplishment and homesickness. Her phone buzzed. "Camilla, how's the tour going? I bet you're exhausted, but you're killing it. Can't wait to hear all the stories." Ava smiled, texting back a quick response. "Exhausted but good. One more event tomorrow, then back to Palm Grove. I miss the bookstore." Ava sat back in the chair, letting the weight of everything sink in. It had been a whirlwind of press, signings, and media tours. She had faced the spotlight in a way she never expected. But as the final event loomed, she knew the next chapter of her life wasn't going to be about the lights or the praise. It was about what she would do with it all when she returned to Palm Grove. The next morning, as she prepared for the final signing, her publisher's representative, Liza, approached her backstage with a glint of excitement in her eyes. "We've got something special lined up for you," Liza said. "There's a press event later today, major coverage, maybe even national. This is your chance to really step into the spotlight." Ava hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the recognition, it was everything she had dreamed of when she first put pen to paper. But something in her had shifted. She wasn't the woman who wanted to be on TV, surrounded by cameras. She was the woman who found joy in the small moments, reading a book to a child, chatting with a regular customer, or organizing the shelves in her bookstore. "I'm ready to go home," Ava said quietly. "I've been living this dream for months now, but I think it's time to return to where I started." Liza looked surprised. "You're sure? You've got momentum here, Ava. A book tour doesn't come around every day." "I know," Ava replied, standing tall. "But it's not the tour I need. It's the work. It's the stories. And I think I can do that best at Sunshine Reads. Liza studied her for a moment, then nodded, her smile returning. You're the author, Ava. You make the rules. But whatever you decide, you've earned this. You've done something incredible. Ava nodded in thanks and took one last look at the bustling Jacksonville event. The lights, the cameras, the crowds, it had all been a part of the journey, but it was not her destination. That evening, as the last event of the tour concluded, Ava boarded a flight back to Palm Grove. The quiet comfort of her hometown felt like a blanket wrapped around her, familiar and grounding. The plane touched down, and as she stepped off into the warm Florida air, she felt as though the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. The following morning, Sunshine Reads opened its doors for the first time in weeks. Ava felt a renewed sense of purpose as she greeted customers, helping them find the perfect book. It was simple, but it was hers. The world outside might have changed, but here in the space she had built, she could be herself, bookseller, writer, and storyteller. Her first customer that morning was the same woman who had recognized her at the book club. She walked in with a wide smile, and for the first time, she didn't need to say anything. They simply exchanged a knowing glance. The woman held up a copy of The Fire Beneath Us. I've been meaning to ask, she said, her voice low and respectful. When's the next one coming? Ava smiled, her eyes sparkling with the knowledge of what was to come. Soon, she replied. Soon. As the day wore on, more customers came in, each one acknowledging her in subtle ways, by asking for book recommendations, by talking about their favorite characters, by sharing their own stories. She was no longer just a bookstore employee. She was Ava Blake, the author, the person who had touched their lives in ways she never imagined possible. By the time the sun set over Palm Grove, Ava sat at her desk, typing out the first few sentences of her next book. The weight of the past few months had taught her a valuable lesson. She could balance both worlds, the quiet, humble bookseller and the author who had something to say. It wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about embracing both and finding peace in the spaces where they intersected. Ava Blake had learned to step into the light, but she had also learned how to return to the shadows when she needed to. And in that balance, she found her truest self. And so, the story continued. The end. Moral lessons from the author behind the counter. Embrace your true identity. One of the most profound lessons Ava learns is the importance of embracing her true self, both as a bookseller and as an author. For years, she kept her writing hidden behind the counter, fearing judgment or feeling unworthy of recognition. It's only when she allows herself to step into both roles, author and bookseller, that she finds fulfillment. This teaches us the importance of accepting all aspects of who we are, even those we might feel hesitant or afraid to show the world. In our personal lives, we often wear masks to fit in, but true happiness comes when we embrace our unique qualities and strengths without shame. The journey to self-discovery is not always linear. Ava's journey from being a quiet, unnoticed bookseller to a recognized author is filled with moments of self-doubt, hesitation, and discovery. The moral here is that self-discovery is not a smooth, predictable path. Often we expect our growth to happen in neat, ordered steps, but life's journey is messy and unpredictable. Ava's internal struggle between the life she built in her bookstore and her dreams of becoming a public figure is a testament to the complexities of personal growth. Sometimes we must allow ourselves the space to explore different versions of ourselves, take detours, and even make mistakes before we find our true direction. Success doesn't define who you are. When Ava is offered the book tour, she is initially excited by the idea of national recognition. However, as the tour progresses, she realizes that success, in the form of media attention and book sales, doesn't define her identity. It is the personal connections she builds with her community and the sense of purpose she finds in her work that matter most. This lesson speaks to the heart of success. It's not about external validation, but about staying true to your passions and finding fulfillment in the things that bring you joy, even when others might not recognize them. The value of small, meaningful connections. Ava's most rewarding moments come from the small, personal interactions she has with the customers in her bookstore. The woman from the book club who shares her thoughts, the children she helps pick out books. These quiet exchanges are what Ava treasures most. While the large crowds and media attention are exhilarating, it's the deep, meaningful connections that provide true satisfaction. This teaches us the importance of nurturing personal relationships, not for any recognition or gain, but because those connections are where we truly grow and find purpose. We may not always be in the spotlight, but our impact can be profound in the lives of those around us. Don't be afraid to take risks. Ava's decision to embark on the book tour was a risk. She was leaving behind the life she had carefully crafted, stepping out of her comfort zone, and placing herself in a world that was unfamiliar. But it was in taking this risk that she learned new things about herself, both as an author and as a person. The tour allowed her to grow in ways she hadn't anticipated. Taking risks, whether big or small, is an essential part of personal and professional growth. We often hold back due to fear, but the truth is that growth only happens when we challenge ourselves and step into unknown territory. Balance ambition with contentment. Throughout her book tour, Ava is confronted with the allure of fame and success, yet she comes to realize that the external rewards of her writing career are not the things that bring her true happiness. It's her life in Palm Grove, the simple joy of being part of a community, that fills her heart. In a world that constantly pushes us toward more recognition, more wealth, more success, it's easy to lose sight of the things that truly matter. Ava's story encourages us to find a balance between ambition and contentment. While ambition can push us forward, contentment in what we already have is what sustains us. You are not defined by your past or circumstances. Ava could have let her past define her, starting as an unknown author who had to hide behind the counter of a bookstore for years. But she didn't. She took control of her story and stepped into her role as an author in her own time. This lesson teaches us that our past does not determine our future. Circumstances can shape us, but they do not have to limit us. We all have the power to redefine ourselves and rewrite our own stories, no matter where we start or what challenges we face along the way. In conclusion, the author behind the counter teaches us many valuable lessons about self-discovery, authenticity, and the importance of meaningful connections. Ava's journey is a reminder that success is not just about external achievements, but about finding balance, staying true to ourselves, and taking risks to pursue our dreams. Ultimately, it's not the recognition that matters, but the satisfaction of living a life that aligns with who we truly are. Thank you so much for watching The Author Behind the Counter. Ava's journey of self-discovery, the courage to embrace her true identity, and finding balance between her public and private life is one we can all learn from. I hope her story has inspired you to reflect on your own dreams, identity, and the way you live authentically. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and motivational content. I post regularly and I'd love for you to join our community. We have many more stories and lessons to share that will help you navigate life's challenges and motivate you to keep pushing forward. Also, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Ava's journey and how you might have handled her situation. Don't forget to check out other videos on the channel for more stories that will inspire and motivate you. Thank you again for watching and being a part of this journey with me. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.